This here is a throwback, but I never knew this interview happened. It's basically Dan Wootton talking to Andrew Tate about Meghan Markle. Now, Andrew Tate is one of those polarizing figures, and I'm sure some people following me don't like him, which is one reason I want to feature this. Because a lot of people following me also don't like Meghan Markle. So I just wanted to show that if you've got this cartoon image of Tate, there are things you'll probably agree with and things you don't. So it's just good not to look at someone as some cartoon character who is good or evil. And having said that, some people ain't so crazy about Dan, but it is what it is. I've said before, he's on the same page with Meghan, so what can I do?
So Andrew Tate, great to have you here. People are so terrified when talking about Harry and Meghan because they're worried that they're going to be accused of racism. You're clearly not worried about that.
No, I'm not worried about that. I refuse to live in an absolute fantasy, and people are dodging around the true issue. I'm a person of color myself, but I don't think that's why I'm inspired to speak the truth. The fact that racism is being used as a justification for the fact that she isn't liked by the majority of people is a cop-out. It's not the case. She does not garner any kind of racism in day-to-day life. She's less dark-skinned than me, and I certainly haven't suffered from any racism. So I don't think race has anything to do with it. I think she's just a dislikable person and is trying to find another excuse for that, for people to treat her that way.
And this fits into one of your bigger narratives, doesn't it? Which is that you're very worried that men today seem to be embracing the idea of being victims. And you say that one of the reasons that you are a resilient human being is because you have lived through trauma, but that trauma actually propelled you to success.
So what I think Dan's talking about with men being victims is a lot of guys these days are getting, more feminized. Testosterone levels, I hear, are lower than ever. Not necessarily like they're playing games and things like that. Like they're actually getting to be more feminine and embracing this victim mentality more.
Other than bringing you down to victimhood.
Yeah, the baseline of masculinity is that bad things are going to happen to you and you're going to absorb them and you're going to use them and to grow into a more competent individual. If you look at what society expects of men and what even females expect of men, they expect a man of competence. And for you to be competent, you have to have lived through some things. To be good at being a man, you have to have had a hard life. If you look at any superhero, his life was hard. This is the reality of it. And I think that the demasculinization of men is a genuine plague we are suffering with in the West. And Harry, in many ways, he's ended up a beacon for that.
So you think he has been emasculated by Meghan?
To a degree, certainly. He certainly lost a lot of the respect of the people and the people who were fans of the royal family. They've certainly lost a lot of their respect. And Meghan has something to do with that. It's certainly the way she talks about the royal family as a whole, the way she talks to him and about him. There's certainly an element of people waiting for him to stand up and say, listen, that's the royal family. You can't talk that way, or you decided to be with me. There were certain things you were expected to do. But he simply just allows her to demasculinize him in public, and everybody feels uncomfortable with it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think when he says stuff like that, it's just like 100%. And also what he said about being competent as a man and going through something is also, I think, pretty accurate. It's not the only way. I mean, if you're born like fluffy rich, you could still join the army, go out there, get experience, and do things on your own. But I think his bottom line is you need to experience taking hard hits and coming back and growing from that. And this kind of advice, I think, is just spot on. So when people say to me, well, Andrew Tate's toxic, he hates women or whatever, I'm like, you know what? Some things he says maybe alluded to that. Fine. But he also says a lot of things that I think are pretty accurate. Obviously, if you're not a fan of Meghan and Harry, which I know a lot of you aren't, what he's saying should make sense too. It's very frustrating watching a royal not put their foot down on this low-level Suits actress who can't do anything on her own. She could barely make a fruit platter that looks appetizing.
People also feel uncomfortable now to have conversations about race because it's so easy for the MSM to accuse you of racism. Now, I grew up believing in a colorblind world, and that's what I was told at school, that we shouldn't actually obsess about someone's race. Now, if you sign up to that philosophy, you're described as being racist. And it feels to me like Meghan has really utilized that?
Well, there are certain buzzwords. There are certain words you can hide behind in modern society, which people are not allowed to challenge. And it allows you to have ideas inside of a vacuum where you can develop these narratives that are never directly contested. And racism's one of them. You're completely right. People can just cry racist and you're not allowed to challenge the idea. And I stand up and say, I do not think that the problems with the public perception of Meghan have anything to do with her skin color whatsoever, especially the fact that she isn't even particularly dark. I find it very strange. A lot of the people who are standing up for her, I've seen many liberals, black liberals from all around the world who are standing up for her saying the race card, the race card. Why would you allow somebody to use the race card when they're not genuinely suffering from it? Doesn't that disrespect all the people who actually suffer from genuine racism?
Well, I think it does.
So do I.
Because there are so many contradictions in that Netflix series, because Meghan actually says the only time she ever experienced racism was someone in LA calling her mum, who actually does have much darker skin than her, the N-word. But actually, Meghan said she had experienced no racism herself, yet she enters the royal family and all of a sudden it helps her victim narrative to suggest that she's been a victim of racism.
Right. So I think the thing is, Meghan used that word with the royal family because it seems like the one thing that people just always react to, build sympathy. They think, oh my God, you know, well, some people. In some ways, it's also lost its meaning. But the point is, it was one thing I think she could pull on them that they couldn't quite totally defend themselves from. And you know what? If there was so much insulting about her race and all this kind of thing, put the goddamn recorder on. Get some proof. I think she called this out in like 2018, 2019. We all had phones. That wasn't before we just had click record. Just saying. Yeah, in the 1980s, 1990s, early 2000s, not everyone had this like in the pocket recorder. But if you're accusing something of going on for so long and so many times, well, why weren't you pressing record some of those times?
And actually, if you saw her wedding, I mean, the British public completely embraced her.
Well, if the British public had a problem with race, I don't understand how we have a prime minister who's darker skinned than her, a mayor of London who's darker skinned than her. It doesn't even make sense on any level. I would state that England is one of the least racist nations on the planet. And this is one of the things that's kind of detrimental. The people who are obsessed with race and obsessed with racism, constantly calling it out, they in many ways speak it into existence, because most of us, like you said, like yourself, like myself, we don't see color. We treat people with respect. And if somebody's a likable person, they're a likable person. And if they're a dislikable person, they're a dislikable person. And their color has very little to do with it. It's just kind of ironic that nobody else wants to stand up and point out the glaringly obvious. But nobody looks at her and thinks, wow, look how dark skinned you are. So it's kind of incredible that this is the angle she's going down and nobody else seems to want to mention it. And
yeah, I've said this myself over and over. She doesn't even look dark. I thought for years, when I was just seeing her surface level before I even got interested whatsoever, she was Italian. I had no idea. She doesn't even have like an ethnical black name. It's just weird, actually. Never heard her name Markle before, but it's just a very neutral, could be any race name. Anyway, I'm going to end it right here. As I said in the beginning, if you don't like Andrew Tate, or maybe you haven't actually listened to him and don't like him, I'm going to bet you probably agree with some things he said, if not everything, about Meghan and Harry. If you're not subscribed here, consider it. If you don't, I'll be sad, but I'll get over it. See you next time.